Welcome everyone to a special edition to the Yoga Day Summit here. Some good friends had recommended that I meet Shree, the founder of New Dharma, and after reviewing some of his material on his websites, some of his videos, and reading some of the articles, I realized that he had a profound insights to offer here with this rich content we have looking at the ancient roots of yoga and its role in modern transformation. And so Shree, thank you so much for being here with us on the Yoga Day Summit.
My delight.
Now we're celebrating the United Nations International Day of Yoga and looking at how yoga can transform life, basically transform consciousness. I was really touched and inspired by your experience of an awakening in consciousness. I would love to explore what your experience was and insights from that can help people looking at the different stages of consciousness. So tell us briefly here just about these profound awakenings that started to happen for you.
Okay, I'd be glad to. January 4th, 1998. I was an architect. I've been an architect for 25 years at that point. Married, children, material man, fully engaged in the world. Had a solar energy business, was a community activist. I was running on all cylinders. And late one night, I went into this unspeakable state of grief and despair. I seemed to have met something in myself that I'd never met before that was so dark, so self-centered, so separate, that it actually created so much anguish in me that I went unconscious on my drafting board. When I came up, I was in this unspeakable, different condition of consciousness. No, at that time I had no frame of reference. I do know now that I had a glimpse of something so intolerable to my consciousness at that time. It is what knocked me out. But it left something so completely devastating in terms of what I was previous to that moment that I never recovered. Now, when I came out of it, I knew that like the lottery of all lotteries had just been won. I was not meditating. I had some Buddhist friends who we would meditate with once in a rare while, but I had no motive for this. I was happy in my life. I wasn't doing yoga consciously. There was nothing in my life that was oriented that way. When I went upstairs, I was in my basement office. I went upstairs, it was late at night, and my wife, I opened the door to the bedroom and she sat straight up in bed and tears were pouring down her face. And she said, "What has just happened? What has happened?" And at that moment, I recognized whatever has happened to me is not just personal. It's not just subjective. It affected her. We talked a bit. She went back to sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and I'm sitting in this state, so unspeakably full, so vast. And I'm in the middle of the universe, consciously in my body, sitting on the edge of bed, looking out the window, and I am in literally the physical universe where I am bodiless, looking at the stars at the same time, simultaneously in my body, looking at the desert, the high desert where I live. And I saw in that scene innumerable beings, like as if in the foreground of this field of stars that were busily at work, very intelligently and purposely at work. And I got the sense, unspeakable, that the universe was purposeful, that there was an intelligence, and that it was all working to fulfill a purpose. Now, at that time, I didn't know what it was.
Okay, Shree, I just want to say this really it's so beautiful to hear about this experience, because we've talked with many people about the pain and despair in the world and a sense of hopelessness that can come, global situation. And we talk about, yoga going deeper into consciousness, getting in touch with natural intelligence, that there's some kind of intelligence guiding everything. So to have this direct experience of feeling like there's a purpose, I mean, that is profoundly comforting to hear. Now,
It's the key of my message.
okay.
It's the key that actually, it's not my purpose. It's not your purpose. It is a purpose that came in over the years that I spent from that point on in India and in my own experience. I saw that it is an expression of the original intent for existence that we all are actually an expression of. That literally what lives us is this purpose. We know it or not. And the purpose gets distorted because our consciousness has to reside in human bodies, and human bodies carry the evolutionary error of separateness, carry the error of human mankind for, untold thousands of years. It's cruelty, it's ignorance, it's separation, it's destructiveness. So we all carry a piece of that inherited collective karma. So the vehicle that the consciousness is occupying in order to fulfill its purpose, its expression into existence, is distorting it or preventing it from its perfect outlet.
Okay, this is where I mean, this is just so delicious to be able to explore this, because I know, just to fast forward a little bit, that after these awakenings, you started exploring, how this is happening. You spent 7 years in India with a very advanced yogi, and then through these processes of going deeper into these yogic traditions and others, you started to develop an understanding of the different stages of consciousness within this realm of a larger purpose of the universe manifesting itself and experiencing itself. Is that right?
That is correct. That's it.
Okay. I want to keep coming back to that overall purpose, and yet also coming back to this sense of separation and this awakening that each of us individually, I say quote unquote individually, can happen. Can you kind of take us through those stages?
Yes. Well, there's a number of things. Like, obviously, in my case, there wasn't any conscious yoga. And what is, for me, the word yoga are actions that are aligned with this purpose.
Okay.
So maybe we have a sense of the goal of that purpose, but in any case, knowingly or unknowingly, we're an expression of that purpose. The more we can move aligned with that purpose, the more this current that comes with existence, the purpose, can be felt. And therefore we begin to awaken. The nature of the consciousness that's embedded in the vehicle of our personality, the whatness of the who we are, begins to become more illuminated, more tangible, more felt. And when that comes, there is this either an awakening event or a longing or aspiration that gets activated. An awakening event, of course, throws you into an altered state of consciousness. We'll talk about in a bit the different stages that occur in the journey. But even if it doesn't awaken us, we find within us either a despair. It's like we wake up to our bondage. We wake up to our separation, like I experienced in that very intense moment. And for me, what took a moment, most people spend years going through this period of despair, which is the byproduct of the awakening of the purpose within the person. Is often terribly misunderstood because the ego wants to get away from the despair and the darkness and the conditioning. But in fact, it's evidence that the purpose is trying to unfold, manifest itself in that purpose.
So the despair is actually an indicator of potentially awakening.
Absolutely. Well, I will say that nature, spirit and consciousness are the same thing. Consciousness and purpose and spirit are the same thing. Intelligence, consciousness, and purpose are the same thing. And Dharma is the way we live aligned with that intelligent purpose, if we know it or not.
Beautiful.
And that the nature of when we're in alignment with this purpose, if we know it or not, is we feel more alive.
Uh-huh.
We feel more connected to life. We have a sense of the opportunity that life is, even when difficulties come at us, even when we're overtaken by our conditioning or our circumstances, there is some capacity in us, strength in us to keep going forward.
Uh-huh.
That means we are living aligned with essentially the essence of what yoga is.
Right, right. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Do you want to touch on just briefly about, I mean, it took you a little while to stabilize into this. You know, you had a very advanced yogi that you were working with in India.
And the key of this is that I was having experience, but I wasn't having much understanding, except, like I said, it was purposeful. When my awakening happened, I asked, why would this happen to me? Because I wasn't a spiritual person in my frame of reference. The person who told me, gave me the best answer, said, when the fruit is ripe, it falls.
Mm.
It is as if the bud of my separative ego had lost its ability to grip my consciousness, and it fell away.
Mm.
And the essence of what I was came forward. This essence of what I was and what all of us are is this current. And if we know it or not, it's that part of us that without doubt, without question, knows it exists.
Mm.
It's the part of you that knows you exist. Nobody can tell you you don't exist. You exist. I exist. That central principle is manifesting itself through us into existence, not as our personal issue, our personal ego, or our personal story, but as an expression of this universal principle that's bringing itself into existence through us.
Mm.
Yoga is the conscious collaboration with that process, where the person takes effort to understand themselves, to restrain the behaviors that are not constructive to this purpose, and to strengthen the behaviors that are aligned with this purpose.
Beautiful, beautiful.
When the yoga comes, then there is an apparent shift stages by which the consciousness reveals itself to the person. Because without the person, without the body, there's no one to know anything.
Mm-hmm.
Without you as an individual, without me as an individual, with our individual story, the universe can't know itself. It can't know itself by itself. It can only know itself through the self-aware human being who discovers it for themselves.
Mm.
So the universe is seeking to know itself through each of us, because that's the only way it can. When we get in touch with that possibility, when we get in touch with that, there's this expanding in our capacity to be in touch with that organizing purpose and to live aligned with that. And with that, the current, the felt sense of longing for God, or the aspiration for truth, becomes more and more tangible, and it takes over our yoga. So there's a stage where we have to apply effort, a stage where we have to apply discipline, where we have to, make the body healthy. We have to withdraw from the parts of our life that distract us or overtake us. We have to learn detachment. We have to learn discrimination to know when our mind is tricking us and telling us lies about the world that is just conditional programming. We have to be able to discover, these are the efforts we apply, how to live other than the way our conditioning would have us live.
Right. And in reading your article on Four Attainments, you were talking about this, like from ego to self. Is this the stage?
That's exactly it. So the struggle of coming from the separative ego and all its activity, ego is basically an activity, and coming to the place of the self, which is essentially, you could say it's the sense of I amness, but without the activity.
Okay.
So the I amness without activity, silent and still. When it starts coming, there's a sense of calmness and peace and silence that the person begins to experience. And there's technology that allows us through yoga, pranayama, meditation, very effective yoga, hatha yoga itself, all bring us back into this more centered, present time relationship with existence. The moment we become quiet enough, the current can be felt more tangibly.
Mm.
If we're always busy, always justifying, always thinking, always in activity, we don't have much access to it, even after we awaken. We have to have practices by which we can stay receptive. And then through us, this current can keep manifesting itself, and it will always manifest itself as existence, consciousness, and bliss.
Mm-hmm.
More aliveness, more consciousness, more awakening, more awareness, the greater sense of how things are outside of our personal sphere of interest or influence.
Mm-hmm.
And this ananda, this sense of being in the possibility of existence and being in relationship with existence. These are all the characteristics of the purpose as it begins to be felt in our body and our system. So the first stage of yoga is learning to break the remaining habit of our conditioning by dismantling and withdrawing our consent to act on it and begin to find this place of rest, silence, and stillness within ourselves. So we start coming out of the stress of our existential stress of being a separate human being, always trying to prove themselves or justify or rationalize or compensate for weaknesses or doubts and worthiness. And we begin to be more and more okay. So the movement from ego to self is this sense of greater relaxation, greater peace, greater connection with other people, with yourself, with the world. So by the time one comes to the state of the self, and in Sanskrit, essentially the self is the Purusha, the being. Purusha means being. So it's the beingness that we are, not the doingness of our ego. The being that was there all along, but the doingness distracted us from it. So we become more able to rest in the state of pure being, which doesn't have the self-referencing and the justifications and the keeping tracks and the strategies of our ego. So it's a freed, relaxed, expansive state that allows us to be light in life more true, more aligned with the purpose. And then, at some point, when one has stabilized in that state, the individual has the veils of the individual person, their mind and their vital and their body relaxes enough that this current can express itself more fully through the system, maybe the mind first, maybe the heart, or maybe the body, or all three, or any combination. And it starts bringing itself into existence more fully. We step out of our individual boundary. We step out of our individual ego and we step out of our individual being and we start meeting the source of our individual being, the source of our individual I amness. This is when the universe, I say when we move from the self to God or truth, the sequence doesn't matter, we step out of our individual boundary. And we begin to experience life from that state of consciousness, which is vast, which is free, which has a stability, has a strength, has a piercing showing of the nature of things. It brings with it experiences that we, as human beings, had not been able to experience before. The Kundalini awakening experiences are an example of the body beginning to awaken individually into these universal forces. The Kundalini Shakti is expression in the body. The longing and devotion for God is expression in the heart. And the opening up to this free, vast, stable power, truth is the expression of the intelligence. We all have different emphasis. So therefore it comes to us in any one of these frequencies at different times, or perhaps one exclusively. But the problem with these bigger energies is that we can't hold them in the human nervous system as we've known it. When they come, they tend to push the system. And any remaining obscurity or conditioning or clenching and darkness that we were able to operate on top of in the state of self, we can no longer operate on top of. It starts showing us the hidden darknesses. Now this movement from individual to universal can happen even when you're still in ego, but there's no preparation. There's no control. You can end up in a mental hospital. You can end up thinking something's terribly wrong with you. So glimpses can come because the purpose isn't personal. It's like nature. It's like a storm. If you're in the way of the storm, too bad. Ready or not, here it is.
And so if a person's starting to have these experiences, this is where there's a lot of support from yoga, potentially yoga, different teachers who have gone through these stages to help stabilize and to realize, A, I'm not going crazy or insane.
Right.
Maybe I'm going out of my mind, but I'm not going crazy.
Yes. Something to celebrate rather than to be afraid of.
Yeah. And so, as you say, I remember someone asking Yogananda, will you grant me samadhi? It's like you would burn to ashes. Your body's not ready for it.
No self-respecting ego would want that.
I love it. I love it. And so what do you say to people who maybe have been having glimpses, of these different...
Well, I think information is the first thing, right? Information, because the mind is the most developed in the West in terms of our consciousness. And usually we can understand something, we can be with it better. But if one takes up the practice of meditation, if one can, depends upon the state of their opening experience. But it's previous practice, the hatha yoga, pranayama, restraining the senses, disciplining pulling away from the negative habits, coming out of the environment that doesn't support the awakening, make your outer life be more in alignment with your inner. Let your life become simpler. So there's more space, more room for you to be able to be with what is arising. Then our capacity to hold this transition improves. If we're still reinforcing the clench of our separative existence, then it makes it harder. But if we can step out by redesigning our outer life, changing our circumstances, and you'll know it's right because you'll feel better as soon as you get rid of it. You'll feel better as soon as you start doing the right action. So these are simple directions, but I would say also there's now enough information enough spiritual teachers, enough spiritual teachings that are out there for the beginning awakening that occur in the process, both one who is practicing yoga consciously and those who were not, like myself, who were not, who get overtaken by it.
Yeah, and so there's quite a bit of information and teachers available for those different stages, and yet when going into these advanced stages, that really requires support and discipline, I would imagine.
Actually, it's different. The real thing is correct understanding, because mostly when these universal experiences come in, they shut down if the vehicle is not capable of holding it.
Okay.
They go away.
Okay.
But what you would want to do is prepare your vehicle so that when it does come next time, which it will, as long as you're aligning with that, because when that leaves, even though there's turmoil around it, the initial glimpse is so wondrous and so great and so true that it leaves behind an aspiration to get it back.
Right.
That aspiration is yoga. That aspiration is then we automatically start taking actions aligned with that movement in us. That is yoga.
And I remember one of your articles you're talking about, for some people who are deeply devotional, it can be a love affair.
Absolutely. And that's what it was for me. I didn't have fear. I didn't have a lot of remaining content. I'd worked a lot out in the course of my 50 years as a human being. So when it came, I didn't have the constriction. And I know I work with many people where the constriction comes. But for me, it was all devotion. It was just absolute wonder and love. And then when I finally met my guru and I saw a video of him in the United States, the states of intoxication were just unspeakable bliss that was just causing my body to spin like a pinwheel in the energies of the recognition of what he was. And the fact that he was living, the fact that he was Indian, the fact that he had attained the state, and I recognized it in the first glimpse of him, that was trying to come to me, was such a blessing that it was a matter of closing down my wife who had to learn how to get used to this idea. but she was initiated with me by my teacher who recognized the partnership that was possible over the long term. But when I left to be there, it was all devotional. And if it wasn't just to the form of my teacher, I didn't have a sense of a particular God, a personal God, but I just knew I loved it and it loved me, absolutely.
Yeah. And coming back to this, and we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, Shree. I mean, just coming back to like that love and knowing there's a larger purpose, which our mind can't understand when we're in that pain and anguish of separation.
Right.
And yet that pain and anguish is a part of the unfoldment. And it's really bringing us eventually back into this state of
Absolute love.
absolute love.
Absolute love. Now that love went on for most of the time, 9 years.
Mm.
Towards the end of that 9 years, it then all went away.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, whew. It's like there was no guru, there was no God, there was no seeking. It was all gone in one night. Guru Purnium night, July, full moon, 2007. And it just all went away. And I said, what happened? And that was the beginning of my journey to truth, the absolute, to the absolute supreme, that which exists before existence. And what I discovered from that was that each of us carry a piece of that which exists before existence. We call it the soul. But the soul isn't a thing. It's a doorway into that which is beyond existence. And our being is like the event horizon of existence next to this absolute non-existence. And that is what animates us. That's what brings us into existence. So I discovered what I call the Sat, or the absolute truth. So those are the stages: ego to self, self to God, God to truth. But the sequence can be different. In fact, they're all happening at the same time when you're outside of space and time. So any time in the journey, you can have glimpses of any of these. The point is to make it stable. Integrating this so it becomes a lived, continuous experience, doesn't come and go. What comes and goes is our human embodiment, is our human idea of separate self. The identity shifts from the separate self to that current. We become that, not this. But it doesn't mean we exclude this. It is part of what we are simultaneously.
And so we awaken to this state of truth and
God,
that
and self, and ego simultaneously.
And the purpose, the universe is still playing its role through this body and mind.
Though you individually have completed the purpose, the universe has woken up as you fully. And you then become an instrument or channel, a direct instrument or channel for that purpose.
And knowing your background, having been in activism and so forth, that presence being brought into every situation is quite powerful.
And that's the work. And that anyone who comes to this state, then they become an agent for this purpose to make it more accessible to mankind than it would be without it.
Beautiful. Well, Shree, this is just such a treat. Such a gift. We're going to wrap up here, and even though I feel like we could just stay with this, just in the presence of this conversation for quite a while, any final words for people who are listening around the world?
So those who are pulled to watch this program are already experiencing this purpose. If you pay attention to that purposefulness within you, it will be a longing, an aspiration for something greater, more perfect, more whole, more deep, more true. That's the kind of self. So attend to that, contemplate on that, meditate on that, and you will become that.
And Shree, for anyone interested more in your teachings, and what are you offering people who are interested to go deeper?
Yes, the website is satshree.org. It has a wealth of everything I've just revealed here, many other teachings, the entire Bhagavad Gita, which is the foundation of my teaching structure, because it describes 18 types of yoga in the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And I interpret the Gita as stages of the journey. So if you listen and watch or read those videos that are free on the website, that will be enough. If you complete in sequence chapter 1 through 18, you will have a scaffolding for your yoga, for your journey.
Wonderful. So that's satshree.org.
Yes. And then beyond that, it's on the website. There's different ways to participate, programs. We have a place here in Washoe Valley in Nevada where people can come and visit, so on and so forth. So everything's on the website. That's where to go.
Sat Shree. Thank you so much.
All right, namaste.
Namaste.